So as far as those restrictions go, I think most people are familiar with it, but maybe you could just kind of give a brief rundown of what the restrictions for reptile keeping are in Australia.
Yeah, so we're not allowed any exotic animals in, and we're not allowed to send any of our animals out. So what's in Australia stays in Australia. Depending on what state you live, depends on what species you can keep. Usually it's just native animals to Australia or to your state. Some states won't allow animals that are only occurring from other states, and it's all over the place. It's horrible. Here where I am, New South Wales, we're pretty good. We have most things here, and our system's fairly decent. But then you go down south to somewhere like Tasmania, they're only allowed animals from Tasmania, which if you don't know about Tasmania, there's not many reptiles there.
Yeah.
They're only allowed to keep them, but they are allowed to wild catch, whereas we're not. So I don't know. Things balance out, I guess, but it'd be much better if everything was one universal thing here in the country. But
yeah, it's very strange because where I live, like one of the main rules is you can't own native species. Like that's like the golden rule. Like you're not allowed to own things that are native here. And it's just hearing somebody say that's all you can keep is so opposite. It's kind of strange.
That is so backwards to me because here it's a big risk of if we brought in exotics and could only keep them, it'd be a big risk of having escaped pets and invasive species. That's
right.
What we're all against here. So the fact that you can't keep a native animal is a bit strange.
But I guess that is probably a really good point, is that you guys have an invasive species risk. Where I live, there's absolutely zero invasive species risk just because it gets so cold. So that's probably a big part of it. And then as far as, so if you're a regular and everyday sort of reptile keeper, is there any permitting process you have to go through, or does that only happen when you have a certain number?
So again, it depends state by state. Each state has a different system. I know down in Victoria, they can keep basic things like a blue tongue without a license, things like that. But here in New South Wales, every reptile that is kept needs to be on license. And it's really easy to get. It's not like it's a hard thing to do. You literally just pay, I think it's $65 for 2 years, and you can keep a whole host of your basic level reptiles. So very easy. It's only when you move up to a bit more advanced stuff, and then venomous, of course, it's very restricted, very difficult to get.
So for your collection, are you just able to sit on that basic permit?
No, so most of my animals are basic licensed animals, but things like the Boyd's forest dragons and some of these rarer blue tongue species and stuff, they're the next class up, which is pretty easy to get still. Basically, you need to have those basic animals for 2 years. So 2 years experience with them, and then you'll be allowed to upgrade to the more advanced ones.
That's interesting.
And
so
it's
then
literally just a little bit extra money each year. So
yeah, okay, that makes sense. It's almost like getting your driver's license. Like you got to try it with an adult in the car for 2 years, and then you go from there. So is there restrictions on how you keep? Like do people is part of that like how the enclosure is and how you're setting up your animals? Is that part of that process as well?
Yes, to an extent. It's not something they really enforce, not that I've seen. Unless you're keeping venomous, then they definitely usually come around and make sure everything's locked properly and secure. As far as normal, your basic reptile license, there is for each species a minimum cage requirement size. The sizes are pretty small for the minimum, and I've never seen anyone come and enforce that. But it's really easy to meet that standard anyway. So yeah, there's that, but it's really not that regulated.
So do you think it's an effective way at controlling the hobby there? Does that work?
The licensing in general?
Yeah, just in general, like, because it's kind of an interesting, because it's something that we always talk about here. Like, it would be cool if we could, have people have a bit of a licensing system, because we have, an issue with people, caring improperly. Is there a way to stop that? And is a license the answer? And you never, if people don't really come up and check up on you, then maybe it's not, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I don't really think it helps in that regard. There is tons of people here that keep terribly. And they just don't know usually. And yeah, there's no course or anything you have to go through in order to keep the reptile. You can literally just buy the license and start buying a reptile. There's nothing there. it creates pros and cons. So it's good that there is a system in place so people can keep track of the animals and everything like that. But there's still people that just catch animals from the wild and things like that. They will get a fine if they're caught, but they hardly ever get caught. And then it also opens up for things like smuggling, which is just terrible.
What do you mean by that? You mean that it just because of those rules, the way they're written and the strictness of them, it encourages smuggling, or?
Yeah, well, like I said, we can't bring anything in or out. Right. So people are always going to smuggle them in by usually horrible fates for the animals, especially smuggled out. You see on the news every few months or so, someone gets busted trying to go through the airport with like 20 blue tongues shoved in like containers and socks and things like that, and rice cookers. And yeah, it's really bad. And most of the animals die during transport anyway. And it's just really sad.
Yeah, and I think we, once in a while, in the States anyway, I'm in Canada, but in the States, we'll start seeing, blue tongue morphs pop up that really shouldn't be here. I mean, the chances of them popping up naturally is pretty much impossible. So, they're sneaking
things are getting out,
somehow.
That's for sure. Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Interesting. Yeah, so in the end, it's probably, the system probably, the good people are ended up paying and the bad people just don't follow the rules.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it's a conversation we have over here all the time, and I always gravitate towards sort of the situation that you're saying now is it ends up being the responsible people that pay, and the people who aren't responsible are just going to do the same old stuff anyway.
Yeah, so and then also too.
Oh, go ahead.
There's the native animals going out, obviously, that are getting treated badly, but there's also exotic animals that are brought in, and then because they're illegal, people can't openly sell them. They can't technically have them, so if they don't want them anymore, they will just release them. I know around this part where I live, there is said to be an invasive population of corn snakes. Definitely red-eared sliders have been found, all sorts of stuff like that. And if those animals are found in a collection, they're usually confiscated and euthanized right away. So it's just a sad fate all around for everything. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess if you do have an illegal animal, it will be so obvious. Like, you couldn't post on Instagram or Facebook a species because it's just blatant that it's an illegal animal. Where here, there are certain rules depending on where you are, but it might be, a certain length or a subspecies you can't have. So it's much more gray. So if someone posts on Instagram, you can't blatantly tell. But if someone in Australia posts a corn snake, which they probably wouldn't because they know it's illegal, but it's just obvious. So interesting.
It's just crazy how easily they get spread around. Like, I picked up an enclosure from a lady that lives maybe 10 minutes down the road from me not long ago. It was just off Facebook Marketplace, just a cheap grab, and just talking to her about reptiles. And she was like, yeah, I used to keep my corn snake in it. And I was like, oh, my God.
Wow. Was she aware? Or, I guess she's aware that it's illegal.
Yeah, she was like, oh, yeah, it's highly illegal. I know, I don't care. I'm like, far out. Oh, my God. Some people just don't care,
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I think the reptile world has proved that. So if you could keep anything then, is there a dream list of one day if they opened up the borders, and what's on that list?
Yeah, well, working at the zoo now,